Welcome to Chapter and Verse. Today we have a special guest, my friend Richard Dujardin, who spent more than 40 years at the Providence Journal Company newspapers writing about religion. And we have a number of things we'd like to talk about tonight. Richard, how you doing tonight?
Very good. Yes,
Today.
Nice to see you. Yes.
Thanks, same here.
Right.
And we both saw a couple of movies which are somewhat in the public eye. One of them was a movie called Gosnell. It was based upon a true story of the most prolific serial killer, we're told, in the United States. He killed many infants, already born infants, in elective abortion, and he killed 2 women. In addition to that, 2 of the mothers. The film was based upon police records and court transcripts. It was a very interesting court drama. That's basically what it turned out to be, Richard. Would you say that?
Yes, it was a court drama, and it was actually most of the script came actually from the testimony that's in the transcript of from the trial. So they didn't make up words and things like that. It was actually, most of it came from that.
I found that fascinating. You know, I like courtroom dramas sometimes, like Law and Order, and because they rip things from the headlines, and they put things in an interesting perspective. This was particularly interesting because it was based upon transcripts of the actual trial. And the transcripts were really revelatory. Just an amazing situation to show where we're at in this crazy upside-down world we live in sometimes.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about that movie was the reluctance on the part of prosecutors and police, the social workers, to actually investigate his abortion clinic, because I guess abortion had become so sacrosanct that when there was a complaint filed, they didn't follow through on it, and until eventually it became so obvious and so horrific that they actually decided to.
The police finally got involved.
Yes.
Because of a drug complaint.
That's right. Yes. Right. And so, and then this man is now behind bars. He is. He thought he was going to escape conviction because I guess because abortion is so protected in this country that he just thought he was going to get away with it.
To him, it was accepted medical practice among the late-term abortionists. Even the governor of Virginia talked about actual infanticide, which is one of the things Gosnell participated in. The governor of Virginia said, you saw this, didn't you,
yes,
on TV? He, for those of us who didn't see the clip from the interview by the governor of Virginia, he said that when a baby is born surviving an elective abortion, they'll do their best to make the baby comfortable and then begin to consult the mother as to what to do with the baby. In other words, how to kill the child, if that's the desire of the mother.
Yeah, or whether to allow the child to just die, or to save the baby, depending on what the mother wants. But, which is horrific because throughout history we've always understood that once a baby is born, you try to save it, unless you're in a culture which made a practice of sacrificing babies at the altar of some god. You know, that did happen too. You know, in some pagan countries or pagan areas.
Yes.
They did that. So we were going, and people would look back and say, how could they do that? That's horrific. That's terrible. And how civilized we are. And now you find the same thing happening again. I mean, at least in the minds of some abortion advocates and abortion doctors who think that's perfectly okay.
How distressing.
It's a slippery slope.
Personally distressing. I never can forget Mildred Jefferson was a friend of mine, and someone once said to her, "But Dr. Jefferson, we didn't want to be mothers." And she said to them, "Oh, but you already are. It's just that your mother's arms are now empty." Sometimes she seemed to say things the best.
And for the viewers, Milford Jefferson was a black activist.
Right. Pro-life activist. I think she was the first surgeon, the first, is it female surgeon, or to be graduated from the Harvard Medical School? Something like that. I don't know if it was just relegated to the first African American surgeon. She certainly was that. But she might have been the first woman surgeon. We have to look it up. She was just super, just a super person. I think those of us who got a chance to know her are looking forward to meeting her again under better circumstances than the distressing situation which we face now.
Yeah, right.
So last night, I went to see Unplanned with my son, and I felt near tears, Richard, because along with Barbara Burgess, Brother Larry Dolan, and Julie Bangs, and the St. Martins, we were on the sidewalk at an abortion facility in Providence, Rhode Island. And we were there in all weather, during the rain, during the snow, during the heat, winter, spring, summer, and fall. And Larry was amazing. He would get down on his knees and beg God and beg for the lives of the children. And we were told that between 10 and 20% of the clients scheduled for elective abortions that day turned around and left and didn't come back. I attribute that partially to Larry, Brother La. He went on to serve at the Rhode Island Constitutional Convention, where he got down on his knees and begged his fellow delegates to pass Question 14. And they did. And for a while, Question 14 was a horse race.
That is a referendum that would have banned abortion in Rhode Island if and when this U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and that if this amendment, this question had passed, Rhode Island would have automatically banned abortion as soon as that occurred. But as it was, the question failed because there was a campaign on the other side by the supporters of abortion to they confused it with euthanasia
Yes.
and all the other things, and so the voters were kind of up in the air.
I thought that the abortion advocates did a masterful job in winning question 14 by they say it was by a rate of 2 to 1. They took one of the life movement's core constituencies, the elderly, who really did have a heart for the young and the young helpless children, unborn children, and they took our core constituency and they said to the elderly, these people just want to keep you hooked up to machines, and you're going to be unable to give an inheritance to your own children because the medical costs of the machinery will be such that you can forget about letting your children have an inheritance. And that sort of talk soured them on the issue, and we lost a core constituency. Of course, it wasn't true. No one was trying to hook people up to machines. That would be illegal anyway, because that's an assault and battery. If a patient doesn't want to be treated in any way, even with the use of food and fluids, the patient dominates.
Yeah, right. So, yeah. So, but that question has loomed over Rhode Island for ever since, because the supporters of abortion rights would immediately change their name to the 2 to 1 coalition,
Right.
reminding everyone that 2 out of every 3 voters in that question had supported keeping Roe versus Wade. So it was, and it continued on, and then it changed the minds of a lot of the legislators too,
Yes.
because until then the General Assembly was very pro-life.
Yes.
But then they said, well, 2/3 of the voters go the other way, and then that started changing their minds.
Yes.
Yeah. So
A very interesting development.
yeah.
It was a sad movie for me because while
Which movie are you talking? Unplanned?
Unplanned.
Yeah, right.
because there were certain things we wanted to get out, certain information we wanted the public to learn. And of course, we didn't have the means of production nor the background and intelligence to make a film like Unplanned. But we noticed that when there was a situation requiring medical help, which was summoned by the abortion facility, they didn't call the rescue squad. They called a private ambulance, which made it a private matter. If they had called the rescue squad, like Abby Johnson was saying in her movie Unplanned, that would be a public record, and we could prove that there was damage which was being done to the patients, to the mothers. We heard Mildred told us about about the perforation of the uterus and how dangerous that could be, and that was shown in Abby Johnson's. I guess it's a biography, in a sense, an autobiography, Unplanned, because she used her own experience as the youngest director of Planned Parenthood in America, also Employee of the Year, to accumulate a lot of knowledge, which was happy to share with others, in those of us who saw the movie. But we wanted to tell people about what we were seeing. It was just an amazing thing.
Well, that movie, I think, really touched all the bases. I mean,
Yeah.
it really covered everything, and it showed everything from the the protesters outside, and some of them very angry and very, calling the people who were going inside murderers, and that perspective, and then the other side where protesters who weren't yelling and screaming and calling people murderers, but they were just down on their knees praying, and it showed the perspective, the diversity or the range of ways that people were trying to get through and talk to the employees and mainly to the mothers. And but the whole thing, the situation with the perforated uterus and
Yes.
the woman nearly dying on the operating table there, it showed the whole gamut.
Yeah.
But most especially the actual filming of what an abortion really is.
Yes.
And I have no doubt that people who see that film would be emotionally hit, and would even people who are pro-choice are more likely to have second thoughts about abortion after seeing this film. The thing is, people don't want to. People don't want to. I mean, people who are pro-choice are not likely to go see the movie unless some friends invite them to come. But I think if they get to see it, a lot of young people would be profoundly moved, and I think that could be a turning point and could change the abortion debate in the United States.
Abby Johnson said that with prayer, like the 40 days of prayer people, she said that the abortion facility could experience a 75% reduction in patient participation. They would spin around at times and leave the premises, leaving the abortion facility 75% emptier than they expected to have been.
Yeah, I guess there was a scene in the end where she was talking to people who've been demonstrating, and sometimes it could be they demonstrate and they don't seem to see any effect because the people seem to go in, and once in a while someone would come out and they could easily be discouraged. But what she said was, you don't know that because of your prayers and because of your presence there are a lot of people who never go in because you're there, and it's a huge percentage.
Yes.
And that's where that hurts the bottom line for Planned Parenthood.
It's wonderful.
It hurts the business model. But it is a graphic film. Yes, that's why it's rated an R, given an R rating, right? So
You have to be what age to see an R film?
well, you can go there with a parent or with
Yes.
a guardian or someone, but otherwise you'd have to be 17 or 18, something like that.
So there are girls, young women, who could have an elective abortion through judicial override without even their parents knowing about it.
Mm.
And they could have the abortion, but they couldn't see this movie.
Right, unless they had a parent.
A parent.
Right, yes, right,
Someone.
exactly, yeah. It's one of the ironies of this
Yeah.
whole thing. So, yeah.
So this is a movie, both movies actually, God's Now and Unplanned, our movies, a lot of people don't want us to be able to see.
Yeah, right. You hear all these different things about like Twitter, and for some strange, inexplicable reason, all of a sudden people couldn't access anything about this movie Unplanned on the Twitter feed, because suddenly it disappeared.
It disappeared.
Yeah, it only happens with
Pro-life movies.
Pro-life movies,
conservative political
yeah.
figures.
Yeah, yeah. And there was...
there were about 50,000 it was either 50,000 or 500,000 people who were cut off by Twitter from being able to see the page, the Unplanned page. It's a lot of people.
Right.
Ralph Reed from the Faith and Family Coalition, he lost about 50,000 people from his membership. They were able to reach him and establish a relationship with him, the Faith and Freedom Coalition. And all of a sudden, he was going to address the movie Unplanned. All of a sudden, they got the drop on him. 50,000 people were missing from his operation.
Right. It is sort of diabolical.
It is.
Yeah, right. So, I mean,
it has to do with the murder of babies. I would say it's diabolical.
Right. It's so much, yeah.
One of the things we talked about earlier, it ties into this. There's a censorship by the secularists, and the biased secularists, having to do with the rights of free speech of Christians and pro-lifers, and others too, like political commentators like Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter, who's kind of funny, actually. Somebody once said that she's less a political commentator than an entertainer, and yet she was not allowed to speak. I think it was UC Berkeley that forbade her to speak. They said that if she were to come, she would have to pay the costs of many policemen in order to protect her safety, which is something that none of the other speakers had to face as a restriction.
Right, because you have these brutal thugs who are on the left, who are, I think, very much like the brown shirts in the days of Mussolini, who try to take over and brutalize and take over and rough people up and eventually gain power. And that's what the left is trying to do here in the United States.
And they do it at the same time calling their opposition Nazis.
Yeah, it's an irony. They use Nazi tactics in order to and then call their opposition Nazis, when in fact they are the ones. They are projecting their own biases and hatreds on the government. I mean, on the populace.
On the populace.
Yes, and so it's true. It's we were speaking of. You speak of another. We were speaking about movies most of this time.
Yes.
It's interesting. There was another movie that came out about a year ago with Dinesh D'Souza.
Oh yes.
The Death of a Nation.
Yes.
And this is exactly what his movie was about. It was. It's about how, in fact, it's the left and the Democrats who are really the ones who have carried out this racism throughout the throughout
Yes.
the ages, since the days of Lincoln. And so
I would like to see that movie.
it's available on Netflix.
It is on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah.
The The Death of a Nation.
Death of a Nation.
Is that a play on the words "The Birth of a Nation"?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay.
You know, there seems to be a persecution of the church almost everywhere. It seems like it's open season on Christians, even youthful Christians. A child at recess in school will bless himself or bless herself and pray grace over their meager lunch. And yet an administrator could be called in to inhibit that, to say that it's inappropriate.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of teachers, and maybe even some administrators, are totally ignorant of what free speech is all about. That kind of thing that you just described is something that you would expect to see way back when we were growing up. Those are the kinds of things that used to happen in the Soviet Union. Yeah. Soviet Union was the atheist, godless country, and we were the, America was standing up for God. God
Yes.
bless America, and yet the Soviet Union was doing the opposite. They were trying to discourage religion and ban it, and now it seems that it's turned around where teachers who have grown up and not really studied or studied history or American history, now assume that any sign of faith is an attack on the society, and that the public school system has become the new religion for a lot of secularists.
Yes.
And anyone who tries to challenge the public schools
Yes.
is an enemy of the faith, because they don't believe in diversity. They don't believe in. It's like in their view, public schools and the secular order
Yes.
are to be taught, and it's the only thing to be taught, and they're ready to squash, try to put down any of them.
I don't know if I'm right in this, but it seems to me that the fault of this can be laid at the feet of the educators of these students who teach them that free speech is not appropriate for those who disagree with them. Well, I just received word that we have about 30 seconds left, but we're going to go into this next program about the lemon test and about what is the law of the land when it comes to what is truly applicable. Do you have a quick word to leave?
God bless us all. God, like Tiny Tim said in the Christmas Carol, God bless us, everyone.
Everyone. Amen.
Do they put your name on there too at the
Yes.
under the?
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome to Chapter and Verse. With us today for the second week in a row is my friend Richard Dujardin, formerly of the Providence Journal Company for more than 40 years. We were talking last week about many things, but one of the things we were talking about is what's happening with free speech in our society. And one of the things I ended in our introduction of the subject at the end of last week's program was that I just simply wonder if the educational establishment, like the teachers, the professors, are responsible for giving these young people the idea that it's okay for them to quash the free speech of anybody with whom they disagree. There's an idea that what they call hate speech, which is anything they disagree with,
Right.
is not protected by the First Amendment.
Right. I mean, and they seem to have gotten the idea that anything that you think, well, if it's criticism at your ideas, then it's hate speech.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there is a basis for being down on hate speech where
Oh, yes.
where people are,
Yeah, we
trying
can criticize hate
right.
speech.
Yeah, but here it's not. What we have a situation is people are criticizing ideas, or we're just criticizing people. Well, people. They're. I mean, they're not. I mean, a lot of what is described as hate speech is not really hate speech.
No, it's just an old contrasting view.
Yeah, right. And so there's this warped mentality, and it seems to me, just as a casual observer, it looks like that all the hatred is on the part of the left.
Yes.
They hate.
Oh, it's terrible.
They hate President Trump.
Yeah, they do.
And then their hatred goes on to anyone who works for President Trump.
Yes.
And like that Kristen Nelson, who was
Yes.
who just recently resigned from the Homeland Security. And there are people who are saying, well, she should never get a job again. We're going to make sure she never works again.
You see that?
And it's just
Hatred.
It's just hatred, and a lot of the media too. Certain reporters are so zealous to get anything on President Trump that they throw all facts aside. They're willing to jump at any rumor and make that a news story when they wouldn't do that as objective journalists.
And they went on along that line for years, about 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, 3 years, yes. And so it's like a projection. I think that anyone who calls themselves, when they describe their opponents as haters and they call President Trump, that's a projection of what their own feelings are. They are the ones, they're projecting out
Yes.
their own hatred. And they, when they accuse people of racism, it's normally they themselves who are the racists, who think only in terms of identity politics and who think about this race, that race, whereas a person who's non-racist doesn't even think about race. I
Right.
mean, it's just or everyone is an American.
Or they'll say somebody like Clarence Thomas isn't really an African American
Yeah,
because he's not liberal.
yeah,
Or they'd say so-and-so is not really a woman because she's not in favor of abortion advocacy.
yeah,
She's not really, she's not a real woman.
yeah.
And that's the sort of character assassination
Right.
that's going on. You know, there's something weird also that's just seeming to make its appearance known. I think it was Janet Napolitano, formerly of Homeland Security, who is she the one who went out to University of California at Berkeley and took the presidency of that at that position?
Mm.
She's into what's called microaggression now. Microaggression. She said that, and they're very serious about this. If somebody says at the University of California at Berkeley that this is a good country, America is a good country, they could face disciplinary action for saying that, because they're, I think it's is it Napolitano?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, right. Yes. Janet.
So they're saying that there are people who have a difficult time in our country. And by us saying that America is a great nation, we're throwing shade, as they say, on the people who are having difficulty. So they say that that's a microaggression. That's aggressiveness on the part of somebody who just appreciates America.
Yeah.
I appreciate America. I'm so glad we have a First Amendment.
As immigrants who come to the United States appreciate America, that's where they come. And so and it's a funny thing, that's too, that you hear from the left, they call, they accuse President Trump of being a Nazi because he says he's a nationalist.
Mm.
But everyone, Mahatma Gandhi was a nationalist. He was a nationalist for India. And what they seem to overlook is that Adolf Hitler described, he was a Nazi, he was a National Socialist.
Right.
And the real dictatorial, the real tyranny in Adolf Hitler's world was the socialist part.
Yes.
The socialists are the ones, socialism is where tyranny thrives.
Yes.
And so those who are calling themselves socialists are the ones who are really getting closer to Nazism.
Oh yes, we see this throughout the world. Now, one of the things they'll say is that their brand of socialism isn't Russia or China or Venezuela. They say we're the sort of socialists who are from Sweden and Denmark, but they had a socialist experiment, but they moved back into capitalist framework, and maybe that's what saved them.
Right. Most of the countries of the world that most European countries that had embraced socialism are moving away from it because they see that it doesn't work, and so it's one of the great ironies.
It is.
Yeah, and as when you go back to the question about educators, I think there is somewhere along the line, teachers and educators have dropped the ball and haven't passed on to a new generation as to what socialism really means and what it really does.
Yeah,
and
I don't think they know.
No.
I don't think they understand.
No.
I think they're like a lot of other people. They just picked a side and are moving along.
Yeah. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think it's a great thing that recently, the president signed an executive order to protect free speech on college campuses.
Yes. Oh, such a nice idea. Such a nice idea.
So,
I mean, you know, we come from a different time, Richard. Bill Buckley and his wife used to go on a skiing trip each year with John Kenneth Galbraith. Now, Bill Buckley, for those of us who may not know or may have forgotten, was the quintessential conservative. And John Kenneth Galbraith was the quintessential liberal. And yet they were friends, and they talked with each other about different things, and they didn't throw things at each other, and they didn't accuse each other of hateful motivations or anything like that. They had interesting, lively discussions, and they loved each other. The families they cared about each other. It was just a wonderful thing to see. You know, the ACLU is stymied right now. They don't know what quite to make of this. Because when people go to the ACLU and say, we've got to stop the speech of people with whom we disagree because they're hate-filled, the ACLU is saying, remembering Skokie, the ACLU is saying, but that's not our understanding of what free speech is in this country. And the ACLU defended the rights of Nazis, real American Nazis, to march in a Jewish neighborhood in Skokie, Illinois.
I remember that, yes.
Yeah. And the ACLU was proud of what they did. Now, they had a lot of criticism of what they did. But the point they were trying to make is that if we protect the speech of the unpopular, we are actually protecting our own speech, too.
Right. I mean, there's no point you don't have to protect the speech of the majority because they have the majority anyway. They have it. I mean, the whole purpose of a right to free speech is to protect the minority.
Yes.
And to protect people's ability to speak out and you know, so right. And so people still have that wrong idea. But I guess that's happened on the other side too. I mean, in the past, and I'm sure that there were conservatives who they wanted to push down liberal thought too.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So it's
probably true.
So but the whole idea is to protect everyone's right to free speech.
Very, very, very true.
Like Alan Dershowitz was, you know, the liberal. I mean, he's a civil libertarian,
Oh, yes.
a major icon in the United States, and he was always associated with the ACLU.
Right.
But then recently he's come and he's been speaking out for the conservatives. And he said he's so happy because he said finally the conservatives realize that free speech is important. So he said that the conservatives have finally become civil libertarians too, and he's very happy about that.
He seems, as you say, ebullient.
Yeah.
When I watch him, he's a Fox News contributor now, along with other people like Newt Gingrich.
And all his friends, or former liberal friends, no longer want to speak with him.
I guess not. They don't want. He lives on Martha's Vineyard. He's not invited to their parties anymore.
Yeah, and he said he hasn't changed at all. It's the other people around him have changed. You know. So that's. Yeah, he said, and someday he might be, again, he said the conservatives might be angry at him later on if he, you know, as he tries to protect free speech on both sides.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's been in favor of free speech for a long time.
Yeah.
even as a member of the ACLU, he didn't like the way the ACLU had a guilt by association commercial involving Brett Kavanaugh. They said they had these monstrous figures throughout history, and then this particular monster followed by that particular monster, and then they put a picture of Brett Kavanaugh in there and say, you know, the ACLU is not for Brett Kavanaugh. He's just another one of the monsters. And Alan Dershowitz said, that is an abdication of the place, the important place of the ACLU in our lives. They're giving up the championing, they're giving up the support for free speech. Right. For partisan reasons. How cheap.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people today are saying that the Supreme Court, which may also be somewhat responsible for the mess we're in all this confusion about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in the public square and also in the public schools. And you know, the Supreme Court went so far as to say in the past that students do not give up their rights to free speech the moment they enter a classroom or the moment they come into a school building. And that is a very interesting and important opinion from the Supreme Court of the United States.
Right. Of course, there are certain things, like for example, wearing a T-shirt. You know, there's a question: is that T-shirt? If the teachers say, take that T-shirt off, and
because
that
it's
message
disruptive.
is disruptive. But then again, if the policy of the school is that everyone in the school has to wear the same uniform, and the person says, no, I'm not going to wear that uniform, that's disruptive. If you refuse to wear the uniform, you know. So there is, you know, two ways of looking at it, but yes, right.
Also, if everybody else can wear all sorts of T-shirts in support of all sorts of causes, and yet the pro-life student comes in and says something like, we should revere life, or something like that, and they get singled out, then there's something wrong there. In matters of religion, the Supreme Court has given us a controversial test called the Lemon Test. And they say, well, this can solve a lot of our problems. It doesn't seem to have solved many of the problems, which are still with us. In fact, the Lemon Test is one of the most controversial things today. But what is the Lemon Test?
The Lemon Test grew out of a Supreme Court case. I think it was in the early 70s, like 1971 or so. And the question was, you know, how do you test whether something is constitutional as far as religion and as far as government activity? And the court developed at that time three things that you would look at to decide whether or not it's constitutional. Does the act of the government advance is it to advance a secular purpose, and is it for it to pass the test? It can neither advance nor hinder religion. It should be neutral as far as that goes. And the other is, that escapes me. Oh yeah, and there should not be excessive entanglement between government and religion. So, and that's what they try to, or what the judges have tried to look at in the past. And for example, I guess, but for example, I guess that case had dealt with a situation where the local school district, the public school district, was paying the salaries of the teachers in the private school, and or whenever the teachers were using public school textbooks, they said, well, okay, they're using public school textbooks, then the public school system can pay the salaries of the teacher in the Catholic school. And so, so the Supreme Court, by this, they saw it was an excessive entanglement, and it was helping to advance the school, so advancing the religion, you know.
Yeah.
So they ruled that thing unconstitutional. But then you could take, but let me add a little aside here. Back in the 70s, in Rhode Island, there was a situation where one school district was indeed paying the salaries of the teachers in a local Catholic school, and that was in Burrillville. Burrillville was, they had divided the Catholic school into the upper floors and the lower floors. The upper floors, they were teaching English and history and math. They were considered neutral subjects, and then the others, the others were more subjective, you know, subjects. Well, anyway, at least as far as the math and the science, those were considered neutral. So the public school system, Burrillville, was paying St. Joseph's School the salaries for the teachers who were teaching upstairs. And they were considered public school teachers, even though they were in a Catholic school.
Yes.
And there, it seemed like a clear violation. The ACLU was trying to sue Burrillville to stop the practice. And they went around and it continued because they could not find a single taxpayer in the town of Burrillville to bring suit, to join in the suit, because they said, wait, if St. Joseph's closes down, then that means they have to join the public school system, and then our taxes are going to go up.
Yes.
So no one wanted to bring suit, and it was. But then what happened was that Bishop Gelano saw the situation. He says, this can't be right. And he was the one who closed it down. The bishop was the one who stopped it.
Wow.
And so to avoid, a big controversy. But anyway, going back to the Lemon test, that continued. But there are situations more recently, like when around the time of George Bush, there were situations where school districts were automatically refusing to give any money at all for something like for example, in school safety, they were trying to, the school district would provide rubber asphalt in the school playgrounds in order to prevent injuries, and so they were only doing that for the public schools, but they weren't doing it for the public schools, even though it was supposed to be to help prevent injuries. So in that case, there was, the President Bush's administration argued that everyone should be entitled to that. So that there were some inroads, and the courts kind of relented on that. They allowed, because that would pass the Lemon test, because the school playground does not advance religion. It doesn't, it's just for a secular purpose. It's to protect the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was no entanglement other than paving the playground. So you had that kind of situation there. But now people are looking at it, wanted to see if the lemon test is maybe a little bit outmoded.
Yeah. I mean, things are still happening which are in need of legal remedies. There was a case of a young boy in school, and during recess he would break out his Bible and he would read his Bible. And the other students, some of the other students, became interested in what he was doing. So they'd ask him questions and he'd give them his responses. And the teacher found out about this during recess. It was his own time. The teacher found out about this and confiscated his Bible, took his Bible away. Now, they got a hold of a Christian law firm. And you see, I believe that a lot of these places, they don't know. They just don't know what their job is to do. They don't know what's right or what's wrong. But Jay Sekulow, one of President Trump's attorneys, is also a member of the executive, he's the founder of the American Center for Law and Justice. And they wrote to the, somebody wrote to the administration there. And the administration, once they understood the rights of students, they gave the boy back his Bible, and they allow him now, I think, to read his Bible during recess, and even to interplay and interchange in conversation with other students who are interested in what's going on. Just really interesting. There was a case of we talked about this before. After Ash Wednesday, there was a girl, and she had a cross of ashes. Yeah. This may have been a mistake. You were mentioning this. The instructor washed it off, said, maybe she thought it was just a dirtiness on the forehead or something like that. Yeah. But when it was first reported, it wasn't considered that.
Yeah, it seemed like a downgrading of religion.
Yeah.
And deliberately, and that made a lot of people outraged. Whereas I think what happened was that the teacher had no idea what Ash Wednesday was.
Yeah.
And she just thought that the child had a smudge on her face, on the face, and so she was. I think she was very remorseful afterward when she found out that what it meant.
I believe her.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who don't know what's right or what's wrong. The lemon test notwithstanding, and people just don't know what the right thing to do is. Well, we're coming to the end of another program, Richard. And, I'm so grateful that you're with us in Chapter and Verse today.
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts for the last 30 seconds?
I don't know. Just God bless the United States, I guess.
Yes.
And America.
And as you said before, as Tiny Tim once said, God bless us everyone.
Right.